And so at what point did you meet Warren? And
1959.
And so where did Berkshire Hathaway come from in terms of this partnership that you all have now had for decades?
Well, Warren had been taught by Ben Graham to buy things for less than they were worth, no matter how lousy the business was. You can't imagine a more lousy business than New England textile mills, because textile is a congealed electricity. And the electricity rates in New England were about 60% higher than TVA rates. So it was absolute, inevitable, certain liquidation. Now, Warren should have known better than to buy into a totally doomed enterprise, but it was so damn cheap, he could buy it at a big discount from liquidating value. So he bought a big chunk and finally ended up in control of the business. But the business was going to die, so the only way to go forward from there was to wring enough money out of this declining textile business to have more money than he'd paid to get in and use it to buy something else. Well, that's a very indirect way to proceed, and I would not recommend it to any of you. Just because we did some dumb thing that worked, you don't have to repeat our path. And of course, we eventually learned not to buy these cigar butts when they were cheap and do these painful liquidations, and instead buy better businesses. That's the main secret of Berkshire. The reason that Berkshire has been successful as a big conglomerate, more successful than any other big conglomerate, so far as I know, any other big conglomerate in the world. The reason it's been successful is we try and buy things that aren't going to require much managerial talent at headquarters. Everybody else thinks they've got a lot of managerial talent at headquarters, and that's a lot of hubris. If the business is lousy enough, and it gets a wonderful manager, and the business has a lousy reputation, and the manager has a good reputation, it's the reputation of the business that's going to remain intact. You can't fix these really lousy businesses. You can wring the money out, whatever comes in liquidation, and do something else with it. But most lousy businesses can't be fixed.
But at the time, Warren that's what he was doing. And so how did you convince him?
I helped him. He bought a windmill company in a little town in Nebraska. And Warren didn't know anything about running a windmill company. He bought it because it was cheap. And he said, what do you do? Why can't you fix my windmill company? Who can you get to help me? I said, I've got just the man for you. And so one of my old colleagues from a transformer business who was an accountant, I said, he will fix your windmill company. And Warren was desperate. He just hired him on the spot. And Harry walked in the first day in this little town, this big collection of windmills and so forth. And a whistle blew, and the whole plant stopped for 15 minutes. And he said, what the hell is this? And he said, well, it's respect for the town. Now everybody has a funeral. We blow this whistle and stop for 15 minutes. And Harry said, that'll be the last time. And he just approached everything that way. And of course, another thing he did is he cut away all the fat that he didn't need, and then he found there were certain parts where we were the sole supply. And he raised all the price of those parts. You can see what a business genius we are.
So how did you convince Warren to stop buying the bad apples and start buying the good apples?
I think Warren, he gives me credit for that. He was going to learn it anyway. He just made so much money in this other stuff, and he'd been taught it by Ben Graham.
Sure.
It was hard for him to quit when he was just coining money. But he saw the point. And well, you couldn't scale that business. And it was kind of scrounchy and unpleasant, and you're firing people. Who in the hell wants to do that? So we just wrung the money out and bought better businesses. And we've been doing it ever since. Coming to business, not as business school graduates, but as people who had owned portfolios of securities. We thought like capitalists because we were always in the shareholder mindset. And a lot of people running the businesses think like careerists. And believe me, you got to think like a careerist to some extent if you're in a career. But it also helps to look at the business strategy problems as though you're an owner. And so my advice to you is you don't want to never get to be a careerist so much you don't see it from the owner's point of view. That's what General Motors did. They had a bunch of careerists, and an owner would have seen immediately that their situation was hopeless. And they just romped through it with a lot of denial and stupidity and pomposity. And of course, they went bankrupt. The mightiest company in the world.